What's going on, Packer fans? It would probably help if I actually put my microphone in front of my face. How the heck is everyone doing? Welcome into the Pack-A-Day Podcast live happy hour. Excited for some Q&A. Hope you guys are excited as well. We'll try to stick around for about 40 to 45 minutes. And as long as you guys have questions, keep them coming. Obviously, super chats and any stickers and anything like that will go to the top of the line. And I will make sure I get to them right away. And we'll make sure that I answer those questions. But yeah, start sending in your questions, super chats or not. And I'll get to them as soon as I can. Should be an interesting game. Well, first of all, we got Indeed Brewing Company Pistachio Cream Ale tonight. I hope you guys are all enjoying, whether it be a coffee, a soda, a tea, a beer, a mixed drink, whatever it might be. Cheers to you. Happy Friday. Hope you guys are all doing well. I was starting to say should be an interesting game this Sunday. I have a little bit of trepidation. Obviously, the Jaire Alexander and Elton Jenkins news from today, not great. Two players that this team really, really needs to be successful overall. It just feels like this team can't catch a break from a health standpoint. Like every time they take one step forward, it's like 5 steps back, which is really frustrating. And you know, they need guys like Elton and Jaire. Not only do they need them out there, they need them playing at a really high level. They've already lost Bakhtiari for the year. We know that. Devondre Campbell doesn't look like he's going to play. He did practice in some limited capacity, but he's doubtful for the game. They can't seem to get healthy. And I know it's not just Green Bay. It's a lot of teams throughout the league. But yeah, it is a frustrating thing. And you kind of have this vibe for this team, and it never is getting better right now. Hopefully that can change this weekend. Hopefully they get some good news, when they, do the inactives and Jaire and all those guys are able to play. But yeah, right now it's a little bit frustrating. All right. What do we got? Gatorade, Ann. Cheers to the Gatorade. I need to know what flavor. I'm a big lemon lime Gatorade guy, but you'll have to let me know. All right, Josh. If Jaire's down year due to his back injury, or is there something else wrong with his play? I've gone over this a little bit on a couple episodes as well as some live chats, but here's where I'm at. All right, grape. There it is. Grape Gatorade. Enjoy, Ann. But yes, I've gone through this a couple different times. Here's where things are at with Jaire. From a run defense standpoint, he hasn't been the same since injuring his shoulder. He used to be a guy that was flying up to the football and making aggressive tackles. He, shattered his shoulder, was out for almost the entire season that year. And ever since he came back, just hasn't, played with the same vigor and intensity that he used to in the running game. It's understandable. Green Bay needs him out there. This is not something from a cornerback standpoint that is just for Jaire. There's a lot of corners that unfortunately are a little bit allergic to tackling out there. I don't think Jaire is like egregiously terrible at it. It's not as good as you would probably like it to be. And it's not as good as it used to be. So his run defense grades end up suffering from that. Then from a coverage standpoint, Joe Barry in this defense is playing a lot of zone coverage. So he's just kind of dropping back into his zone, doing his thing, and teams don't throw at him a ton. And when they don't throw him at a ton, there's only so much you can do in those situations. And then unfortunately, when they did throw at him against Atlanta, he didn't have much success in that game from a pass defense standpoint. That was a really tough game for him. And he's kind of been up and down since then. And when you are an all-pro corner and when you are paid the way that he's being paid, you expect and you want the best of the best. You want a corner that's impacting the game and making huge plays. And so far, that hasn't been it for Jaire. When all of a sudden teams aren't throwing a ton, which there is clearly a value add in that for Green Bay. But when teams aren't throwing at you, you're just dropping into a zone and you're not great in run defense. It's not going to look very great because you're just not impacting the game all that much. And when you did get thrown at against Atlanta, it also didn't look very great. So I think when you look at it, and then he's been hurt too, and he's had the back injury since then. So it's just kind of all been mixed together where you end up with this meh season for Jaire so far. Nobody's saying he's a bad player. He's a phenomenal football player. Green Bay's very lucky to have him. Yeah, my guess is as soon as he gets healthy, he's going to go out and tear it up the remainder of this year. But through 5 weeks of the season, his impact has been minimal. Had the one tough game against Atlanta and just hasn't had much time to make up for it. Very small sample size on the whole through his career. He's been fantastic, but I think everyone's wanting just a little bit more out of Jaire, and obviously the back injury is not helping with that right now. All right, what else do we got here? I lost my mouse. There we go. All right, most hated Minnesotan. Lots of Packer fans here in Denver today. Should be a favorable crowd. That is great to hear. Hopefully that stadium is packed with green and gold. Snoop Robbie, do you think that it is possible Goot wants to get a real evaluation of Emmanuel Wilson and was just tired of Matt LaFleur playing Patrick Taylor over him? I don't think so. I think those guys are probably in lockstep. I think I've talked about this. There's an episode specifically that I did, and you can find it out on YouTube and on the audio podcast as well, saying the 53-man roster doesn't matter anymore. It's the 53. What you ultimately want to do with your 53 is make sure that you're keeping the 53 that if you were to waive or get cut, like they would potentially get claimed by other teams. It's not necessarily to make the best roster for this upcoming weekend to go out and try to win a game. It's making sure that you're protecting your best players so that they don't get picked up. And some of those players might be guys like Emmanuel Wilson who aren't ready to play right now. And if you needed to go out and win a Super Bowl this weekend, Emmanuel Wilson's probably not in the rotation, and Brian Gutekunst knows that. But that's why the practice squad call-ups exist. And that's why you can stash guys like a Patrick Taylor, like a James Robinson, who are better than probably Emmanuel Wilson if you had to win a game this Sunday, because he can pass, they can pass protect better. They can catch out of the backfield better. And if you just had to if the job description for number 3 running back just said, all you need to do is hand the ball off to this player, then you're probably wanting Emmanuel Wilson in there. But that's not the job description for that player. It's all those other things, including special teams. That's not what Wilson is great at. So I think right now they're utilizing those practice squad spots to be able to call people up and really have an impact as that number 3 running back while Emmanuel Wilson continues to develop. And the hope is that he will be a player that can be utilized next year, maybe in a number 2 running back even capacity as he continues to grow and get better and better. So that's the goal. And again, the 53 man doesn't really matter all that much other than making sure that you are keeping the 53 that you want to keep and not subjecting those players to other teams. Whereas if you have a player in your practice squad, let's say they did release Emmanuel Wilson, first of all, he could get claimed by another team. If he didn't, you can put him on your practice squad. He's not bound to your practice squad. He could go to any other team's practice squad that he wanted. And if he's even on your practice squad, any other team can poach him at any time. So when you get to the bottom of the roster decisions, it's more of trying to keep your best players that you don't want subjected to waivers or subjected to another team being able to pick them up. That's where we're at with Emmanuel Wilson right now. But I'm sure Goody and Matt are pretty much in lockstep with what they want out of those players. And they probably both know that Emmanuel needs to be a little bit better and more well-rounded if he wants to receive playing time on Sundays. All right. Alex, is Matt LaFleur the right fit for such a young developmental team? I've loved him the past few years with Rodgers, where it felt like that was the situation he was a good fit for, but is he still a good fit? I am still a believer, Alex, that Matt LaFleur is a really good football coach. We're going to learn. We're going to learn over the course of the next couple of seasons if that is the case or not. And I mentioned on numerous occasions, people wanted to call it a reboot, a rebuild, or whatever. This is an evaluation year. It is an evaluation year for so many different things. And next year's probably going to be very similar to that as well. But you're evaluating if Jordan Love can be your quarterback, what Brian Gutekunst and Matt LaFleur, this front office and coaching staff, can do when they don't have a Hall of Fame quarterback at their disposal. This is an opportunity to evaluate Joe Barry as defensive coordinator, Adam Stenavich as offensive coordinator. This is an opportunity to evaluate a ton of young players who are getting significant playing time this season. So those are all the things, and there's way more than that too, that you're evaluating in this year. But we are going to learn a lot about Brian Gutekunst as a talent evaluator and how he builds this team moving forward without having the benefit of having a Hall of Fame quarterback. And the same goes for Matt LaFleur. Now, to your point, I do think Matt was brought in, and Mark Murphy made no bones about this. He made it very clear at the introductory press conference. They brought Matt in to basically make it so that Aaron Rodgers could get back into MVP form. And mission accomplished. They got 2 MVPs out of him. Unfortunately, it did not result in Super Bowl victories, but they were competitive for 3 straight seasons, 3 straight 13-win years, 2 NFC championship games, one of those at home with an opportunity to go to the Super Bowl. Just didn't work out for a variety of different reasons. But then you have to sort of now pivot in the other direction, where this is no longer a veteran-led team. This is no longer a team that has a Devante Adams and an Aaron Rodgers and some of those really core, even a David Bakhtiari right now because he's out injured. And now you're having to, develop all of these young players and get them ready to play in future seasons. That's not the job description that Matt LaFleur was hired in for, but it is in the job description of a head coach of any 30 of the 32 NFL teams in some capacity. And every single coach in the NFL needs to be adaptable. You have to be able to adapt and make do with what you have. And that's another thing that we're going to be able to evaluate and watch with Matt LaFleur is, can he make this work with the rest, or with the ingredients that he has at his disposal? And he's going to have to figure out a way to make it work. And right now, mixed results to say the least. That's probably being kind, but I do think Matt will figure it out. I think this team will bounce back, but these next 2 games are huge. Like I've said, overall, these last couple, at least this past week, you go 2-0 in these games. All right. You can beat bad football teams, and maybe there's enough bad football teams on the schedule where you can make a run at the playoffs. You go 1-1, You are who we thought you were, and you're a slightly below 500 football team. That's okay. Like, this team can be 7-10, and we sort of expected that going into the year. If they lose both of these games, then it's red alerts and everything is panic mode, because that is the opposite of RELAX. That is PANIC, because 3 straight losses to the Raiders and then the Broncos and the Vikings without Justin Jefferson or Marcus Davenport, then it gets to panic mode. So that will be interesting to keep an eye on, but tons of things to evaluate over the course of this season and the next. If Green Bay's on the right track, great. If they're not, then they're going to have to make some aggressive moves, maybe going in a different direction. Jonathan, I'm thinking it's a Herculean game for Van Ness earning his nickname. That'd be great. And you never know when a rookie might have their breakout performance or a young player might have their breakout performance. I think a lot of people would love to see Lucas Van Ness have that sooner rather than later. Football. Hey, great to see you, football. Packers are going to win. That being said, can next week's happy hour be titled Sad Hour? No, we're not doing sad hours here. We're doing happy hours. Cheers to everyone who's enjoying happy hour. All right. Big Al asked if the Eric Stokes will be back versus the Broncos. I don't know. He's practiced consistently. He seems ready to go. He's questionable on the injury report. It might just come down to a numbers game of if they need to call up a bunch of players and use other positions this week. Like, they may not just release somebody to activate him, and they might wait until next week. But if they feel like they can use him and they feel like he's ready, then he very much could be. But right now he's questionable, and that's all we have to go off of right now. He's looked good in practice in the minimal stuff that we can actually see in individual drills, but he looks back and ready to go. Just depends on when Green Bay wants to pull the trigger and actually give him an opportunity to play in games. Jack, you are more than welcome. Yeah, happy to do it. And thanks for the opportunity to do it. You guys are the absolute best. All right, Alex, how much would they save by trading Rasul, and what could they get back for him? Saw your video earlier today. For those who didn't watch the video earlier today, what I presupposed with a potential Rasul trade is a couple different things. First of all, I got something wrong on that I'll correct, I guess, right now. I said that he was going to be 30 next year. He's going to be 29 next year. So either the source that I initially looked at was wrong, or I looked at it wrong, which is it's probably on me. But he will be 29 next year, not 30. But either way, he will be 29 next year. He's not exactly on the same timeline as everyone else on this team. And he's playing his best football that he's ever played. Now, clearly, if he's playing his best football he's ever played, it's not somebody that you usually want to get rid of. It just depends where this team is at. If all of a sudden they do lose to Denver and Minnesota, and this is a team that's looking to sell, well, they've got Jaire, they've got Stokes, they've got Valentine, they've got Nixon, they've got some depth at corner. And if some playoff team is willing to call and offer something significant for Rasul, and you have the opportunity to sell high because his stock might never, ever be higher in his career than right now, then you would actually at least have to take the phone call and have the conversation. As far as what Green Bay would get in return, that's tough. I would think if Green Bay were to even consider it, it would have to be a top 100 pick. Otherwise, they probably just move forward with Rasul. I think they save about half of his contract next year. They'd save a little bit of his contract this year. I'd have to look at the numbers to verify it for sure, but there is a decent savings that they would get by moving on from him. So like I said, Rasul's playing awesome. I don't want to see Rasul off this team, and he's probably my favorite player to watch so far this year, but it gets to the point where if you're not winning football games, you have to look at when you can open that next window. And if you think that next window is 2026, 2027, or wherever it might be, then you might have to look at Rasul and say, like, hey, he has value. We can trade him for a younger player or younger players or draft picks, whatever it might be, maybe a combination of both, and get younger in the process, start, looking to build that next window. And the team that's looking to win now gets a corner that's playing phenomenal football. There can potentially be a bit of a win-win there. Like I said, it's tough to think about because he's playing so well, but that's probably what we'd be looking at. Like I said, it'd probably take at least a top 100 pick to get Green Bay to even pick up the phone. All right. Bucky, do I think the Packers will win on Sunday? I'll save that for the pregame show when I give my official prediction. But let me just say that this is one that scares me a little bit, Bucky, if I'm being honest. It just the vibe, the injuries again. Denver is at home. Green Bay does not play well in Denver. I'm just a little bit nervous overall, but I'll give my official prediction on Sunday in the pregame show. Jay Western, I'm all for it. You show me that Royce Newman breakout game and breakout season, and I'm sign me the heck up. Let's do it. Let's get weird. All right. What does it mean that the Packers need to find their identity? Inside the locker room, doesn't every team think of themselves as able to beat anyone if they execute? Jason, when Matt LaFleur was asked about this, he even said that this team is, sort of looking to find its identity. And when he was asked about it, he mentioned like he almost went in like a player's direction. And if you can think of like in previous years when things are going wrong, or you can't get things going, you've got a Devante Adams that you can go to, and that dude's always open, and you can kind of spam him when needed. You've had Jordy Nelsons in the past, and Clay Matthews, and Charles Woodson's, and like all these players that you can go to when things get tough. Obviously, Aaron Rodgers, Brett Favre, we can go on and on. You guys know the names. Right now, this team is looking for an identity from a player standpoint. Who's going to be the guy that when things aren't going great is going to step up and really make a huge impact and help this team get some really tough wins? I think on the other side of things is it's more of who are you conceptually as a team? What is it that you can consistently win with? What are you great at? What can you go into Sunday saying, we are better at this than the other team, and we are going to beat you with it over and over until you stop it? This team doesn't have that. There's nothing on offense that they can point to and say, we're good at this. There's not really much on defense that they can point to and say, we're great at this. And same thing on special teams. And when you don't have anything, like what I would, ask you guys, what is Green Bay great at right now? They're pretty good at rushing the passer. Like Rashawn Gary's been a beast, and he's been probably individually pretty great. There are very few things. They've been great at field goals and extra points. They haven't missed a single one yet, knock on wood. But there are very few things that this team has done great so far in 2023. And when you don't have anything that you can lean on, when you don't have a concept or a design that is your go-to bread and butter play or bread and butter identity, whatever it might be, it's tough to win games with any level of consistency. Going into a game with the 49ers or the Eagles, what they're going to try to do to you. And they have that identity. They have a physicality. They have a toughness. They're going to run it down your throat. They're going to use a lot of unique concepts. They're just really freaking good at football. Green Bay doesn't have that one thing, that one player, that one identity, that one focus, that one thing they can kick your ass at. And until they find that, winning is going to be really tough. And it's just going to have, they're going to continue to try to find that. As far as in the locker room, do they feel like they can go out and beat any team at any time? I'm sure. I don't think they're scared of anyone. Mike McCarthy would say we're nobody's underdogs. I'm sure they feel that way. But this team, you can feel, Rasul Douglas was talking about it the other day. They're sick of losing. They haven't won a game in about a calendar month. Like they want to go out and get a win. And if things spiral outside of Denver and they can't get a win in Denver, it's gonna be a little bit tough to kind of bounce back. And hopefully Minnesota's a winnable game. But man, they need to pick up some wins here just to kind of get a little bit of momentum back and start finding that identity on offense, defense, special teams, and as a team as a whole. All right, we got a super chat that came in here. Skylar, thank you so much. With the JRJ comments about the offense, when are we going to see the fly motion? It's been noticeably absent so far when all the top teams are doing it. You will see the little, quick motions by Luke Musgrave a little bit, although I think it probably needs to be a little bit faster. Somebody asked me about this, I think in our members only Q&A the other night of John Runyon Jr.'s comments on this and wanting to be a little bit, or like they're going to be a little bit more by the Dolphins or like the Dolphins offense. Listen, this is a copycat league. Everyone wants to be more like the Miami Dolphins on offense right now. You hang 70 on a team, teams are going to take notice. What you have to be careful of is not trying to just go out and be the Dolphins, because the Dolphins are really good because they've got Tyreek Hill and A-Chain and Mostert and Jalen Waddle, who are all, Olympic level tracksters. Like they're just going to outspeed you. So if you try to run the same stuff with your guys who probably aren't quite as fast and maybe aren't quite as made for the system, and also, by the way, have a pretty dang accurate quarterback to run that system as well with a really smart head coach and Mike McDaniel. If you don't have all those things and you try to just copy what they're doing, you're just going to be a worse version of the Dolphins. And at some point, when you have to match up with that team, you're just going to get beat because they're better than you at it. So you kind of have to be a master of what you're good at, a master of what talent you have on your team. That's what Green Bay should be focusing on. Do they need to implement a little bit more motion and a little bit more variety? I think the answer is yes. But at the same token, go back to the 2-point play against New Orleans. If you remember that 2-point play is supposed to be Jaden Reed coming in and then sprint motion to the outside and then catching them off guard and throwing a quick pass in the flat, to Jaden Reed, because he's just sprinting out and has a head start. But what happens on that play? Jaden Reed comes in motion. Josh Myers almost snaps it into his leg, And then Jordan Love has to go completely off script. And thankfully, he makes the great play. Was it to Toure in the back of the end zone? Whoever it was. And they get the 2-point conversion. If not, it's a catastrophic play. And it's probably, they probably lose that game. But what if you can't get the basics down and you're a team that can't block very well and isn't even good with the basics when you're static and doing not much of anything, adding more complexity and more layers onto that isn't usually a recipe to all of a sudden get on the same page and start being more focused and have greater attention to detail. So they kind of have to get the basics down first. You got to walk before you can run. And right now this team needs to do a little bit more walking. And I don't mean figuratively. I don't mean whatever, you know what I mean? They need to be fast, but they need to get the basics down first before they can go out and, really run a lot of more of the more fun stuff that I'm sure Matt LaFleur would love to run, but they just have to kind of get back to basics and fundamentals right now. Exactly. Yeah. I should have just posted this and then I could have shut up and taken a drink of my beer. Well said. So Turtles. All right. Lee Bruce, I never imagined we'd be truly bang average, truly an average bad team this year. I really thought we'd low key be a dark horse. So disappointing how bad the offense is. Well, all right, we can leave the last part out, but I get what you're saying, Bruce. We knew to an extent what this team was getting into going into the year, right? I don't think any of us expected it to be this pathetic at times. And that's what the offense specifically has been over the course of the majority of really since the fourth quarter against Atlanta. Had a little bit of an outburst against New Orleans. Outside of that, the offense has been pathetic. I don't think we necessarily saw that coming, but we knew there was going to be points of struggle. I think the disappointing part to me has really been the offensive line, and Bakhtiari being hurt is a clear part of that. And when you lose that guy, it's just going to make everything else worse. Now Jenkins is fighting injuries again, which makes it really, really tough. And you might be looking at a Rasheed Walker, Royce Newman, Josh Myers, John Runyon Jr., and Zach Tom line this week. And the only guy I trust of the 5 is Zach Tom. You're just not going to win much with that. And that sucks. But I do agree that I understand it's going to be a little bit frustrating at times, but this is the team that we're going to get. And what we want to see is progress. And we want to see consistent progress and this team getting better week by week. I've said, and I know some people disagree because I've seen it in the comments, but if this team was 0-5, but they were getting better every week and progressing in the right direction, I'm fine with that. If they lose some more games, but the players start looking better, the schemes start looking better, they just maybe have a couple bad bounces go their way, that's fine. I don't really care about the record this year. I want to see good competitive play on the field and them getting better as a young team that I can see the vision of, all right, they're not winning games right now, but I can see if this continues to progress and these players continue to have these really high spikes and they can, gain greater consistency with that in 2024, 25, 26, I can see what that's going to pay off as. Right now, it's tough to envision some of the payoff just because we haven't seen some of those high highs from a lot of these young players. I think what we wanted, again, regardless of record, was something that we could sink our teeth into a little bit more and be like, well, they're struggling, but Jordan's playing great. Or, well, they're struggling, but man, Lucas Van Ness looks like an absolute stud as a first-round pick. Or, well, they're struggling, but man, Luke Musgrave looks like he is going to be the next Travis Kelce. Or something. Give us something that we can sink our teeth into and be like, this is going really great. Right now, you don't have that. Plus, you're losing, and that's just a recipe for not fun football. All right. Agreed, Thomas. I very much agreed. Omar, I think we're to the point where if Sean Ryan, if Jenkins is out this week and they put Royce Newman in over Sean Ryan, it's just like, why? Like, what are we doing? You know what you have in Royce Newman. At least give Sean Ryan a chance. It's ridiculous. At least if he's worse, then just cut him. Because if the bar for making a 53-man roster at the least should be Royce Newman. If you are worse than Royce Newman, you should not be on a 53-man roster, period, right? I think we could probably agree on that. Like, that's the Mendoza line. And probably Royce shouldn't even be. But if you're worse than Royce, what's the point of having you on the 53? So if he can't be better than Royce, if he goes out and plays and he's worse than Royce, it's just probably time. Let's try something else. Let's pick up a guard off of some team's practice squad and see if he can be better than Royce. Because if Sean Ryan can't, then just probably end the experiment at that point. All right. Tommy, I think you had a couple of questions here. Andy, I hope your Friday's going well. What are your thoughts on pivoting from Walker to Nyman at left tackle? I know Walker was better in preseason, but with how the run game has struggled and the fact that Walker is their worst run blocker, maybe a change there would help. Nyman was ranked very highly in ESPN run block win rate last year. Here's where I'm at with it right now. I will accept any changes that Green Bay wants to make to the offensive line at this point. I really don't want to move Zach Tom off a right tackle because I think he's playing really well and he's like the one player that is playing well. So moving him and risking like all of a sudden he doesn't play as well is a little bit scary to me. But you're to the point where if you just keep going out with the same five every single week and getting beat, all right, I'm not sure that's going to help anyone either. So if they want to start throwing some crap at the wall and seeing what sticks, by all means, be my guest. I get it. Where I would lean a little bit more right now is, can you get the guys on the field that are at least long-term under contract? Yosh Nijman's an unrestricted free agent next year and is probably not going to be back on the team. Even if he goes out and plays a little bit better than Rashid, like slightly better, I'm not sure that that benefits Green Bay because he's probably gone next year no matter what, and then you're left with Rashid Walker next year. So if Rashid can play his way into being better than Yosh, then I think you want to give him every opportunity to do so. I would say the same eventually at some point for Sean Rhyan, specifically over, potentially maybe over John Runyon Jr. at some point, because Runyon Jr. is going to be a free agent. And you want to probably at least get a look at Sean Rhyan to see if he can be any sort of answer moving forward. In an ideal world, everyone just plays better, but I'm more of the mind of let's have the guys that are under contract and are cheap under contract moving forward and are developmental pieces for you moving forward, get the playing time. I don't think, especially if you're a team that's going down this year, like playing a bunch of guys that aren't going to be on the team next year does you all that much good. And I don't think Yosh is going to be back on the team next year. All right. Lee, I don't think Aaron Jones is going anywhere. I'll just put it that way. I don't think any team's giving up a 2. Maybe a team would give up a team. I think would probably give up a 3. Aaron Jones is the heart and soul of this team, as they've said on numerous occasions. Even if they traded for Jonathan Taylor, I think it would have been a 1-2 between Jonathan Taylor and Aaron Jones. I don't think Aaron Jones would have been part of that trade or any other trade. When you're a team that's struggling and a team that's young, you always want a guy like Aaron Jones in your locker room, but this is a time and a place where you probably want him even more. So I would be, of all the things that could happen the rest of the season, if you told me that Aaron Jones got traded, that would be by far and away the most shocking of just about anything that you could tell me at this point. I don't think he's going anywhere. So I think we can probably put that one to rest. Bucky, they'll be able to do something a little bit in free agent. It's not going to be like a Zadarius Smith, Adrian Amos, Preston Smith, Billy Turner free agency. I think they'll go a little bit of value shopping, but I think they're going to do a lot of their work in the draft still and still look for younger players. I think the interesting thing will be how they finish this year and how hot that seat gets on Matt LaFleur and Brian Gutekunst. If they go 4-13 this year, and again, I'm not trying to speak that into existence, but if all of a sudden they go 4-13 this year, the heat will be picked up incredibly on Goody and Matt. And then in that scenario, watch them go shopping because they will mortgage some of the future to go out and get some players to help save some face and start picking up some wins sooner rather than later. If they get to 7-8 wins this year and they can kind of keep on track with building younger and maybe getting off of some of the bad contracts that are on this team, then I think they would love to go in that direction. But unfortunately, when you get to a point where your seat is very hot and people start talking about fire Goody, fire Matt LaFleur, whatever it might be, in those situations, teams stop making decisions for the long term and they start making decisions for the now. Because if the now doesn't get better, there is no long term for those individuals, and then things get a little bit different. So the hope is they just keep progressing this year and they don't have to make any drastic changes to go like all in next year to more save Matt and Brian's jobs rather than doing what's probably right and best for the organization. And I'm not saying they would do that or whatever, but sometimes those things can change the mindset a little bit. And that'll be interesting to see how they finish this season. Angry, I'm going to go through this soon. I was actually going to go through it this week and just didn't end up getting time to do it and ended up doing different episodes instead. But I want to go through and look at Goody's draft. Just his overall drafting. I think it's going to be really hard to judge right now because there's so many incomplete grades, whether we want to talk about Quay Walker, Devontae Wyatt, Lucas Van Ness, Luke Musgrave, Jordan Love, even to some extent. there's just so many players that you can't give a final grade on yet as to what they end up turning out to be. And I think a lot of his legacy is going to be on a lot of those guys I just mentioned. Really the first round picks, Eric Stokes, Quay Walker, Devontae Wyatt, Jordan Love. Those are some guys that really need to, Lucas Van Ness, even some of the second round picks, Luke Musgrave, like those are the guys, the top 50 picks need to play a whole heck of a lot better. Jaire, one of his like all-time great picks, has not been, again, quite as great as of recent. Darnell Savage is probably playing his last down in green and gold this season, I would think. So yeah, there's some things with his drafts that have not exactly gone according to plan. Probably needs to be a little bit better. And we're going to really see what these guys end up becoming. And if they don't really hit on any of these guys, then things are going to get very hot for Brian Gutekunst as things move forward, because he needs the Christian Watsons, the Walkers, the Wyatts, all those guys, all the guys we just mentioned to really play at a high level to pay off some of those really premium picks, because it's not just like he's had normal draft picks. He's had high draft picks and he's had plenty of draft picks because he also had the benefit of trading away Devante Adams for a first and a second. He had the benefit of trading away, Aaron Rodgers to move up in the first and get an additional second round pick and another additional second round pick next year. Like, he's had additional capital to use, and we haven't exactly seen that pay off so far. All right, what else we got? All right, do I agree with the narrative during the last years of A-Rod that we went all in? That's something I've disagreed with. The Rams went all in. It doesn't feel, I understand where you're coming from, where it does not feel like they went all in. All in feels like you go out and you get a Matthew Stafford and a Jalen Ramsey and you add a bunch of players to your team that way. Green Bay, in my opinion, went all the way in. They had very few. Now, let me rephrase that. They went pretty close to all in. I will always make an argument that they probably should have gone further. If you're going to start mortgaging, then freaking mortgage. And if you don't straddle even a little bit. Either do it or don't. I'm more of an extreme person. If you're going to nuke your future, then nuke your future and let's go get a Super Bowl right now. And I thought they could have done some stuff with trading future picks and things like that maybe would have even buoyed their chances in 2020 and 2021 even more. I will even say in 2021, what did they lose because of? In large part, it was special teams, right? Like, they lost that divisional round game against the 49ers due to special teams. There's a 53-man roster spot that entire season, that entire year in 2021 that was taken up by Vernon Scott as a redshirt player in his second year who didn't play a down on defense or special teams that entire season. They redshirted him and kept a guy in the 53 just to develop him, make sure he wouldn't get claimed. And then he ends up getting cut, I think, in the preseason next year. How about going out and getting the best special teamer that you possibly could to fill that 53-man spot rather than Vernon Scott? Like, that is a little bit more going all in. And like I said, I think they could have done some stuff with trading. However, they did, like, there were points where, like, especially in 2022 and even parts of 2021, where they had very few levers left to pull to open up any more revenue than what they could have done. They borrowed a ton from future salary caps, which you're experiencing the result of right now, where they have a ton of dead salary cap this year. They're going to have more next year. So they were very aggressive in trying to keep that window open and really making it so that, and you also have to remember, it didn't feel like an all-in move at the time because the team wasn't quote unquote ready to go all in yet. Adrian Amos, Preston Smith, Zadarius Smith, and Billy Turner in one offseason is an all-in move. It just came a couple years before they were probably ready to kind of go all in. But that was the initial all-in move to say, hey, we still have Aaron Rodgers in his prime. We have a lot of talent on this team. And now we're going to add Preston, Zadarius, Turner, and Adrian Amos to this mix. And then we're going to go out and we're going to keep this entire team together. If you look at that 2021 team, that roster was freaking stacked in that game against the 49ers when they got everyone back. And really what they should have been, if you look at that, what that team should have been with David Bakhtiari, if he was still healthy, and if everyone else, I think, got healthy for that game, but maybe not playing the full game. But man, that team, Whitney Merciless came back, and like they had Zadarius Smith back in that game, Preston, Rashawn Gary, Kenny Clark, like that team was really, really freaking talented. Rasul Douglas, Jaire Alexander, Eric Stokes in his best season as a rookie. That 2021 team, you'd be hard pressed to put together much better of a starting roster on both sides of the ball if they had everything. And Bakhtiari being out was a huge thing that they were missing that year. And was that Elton's ACL too? I can't remember. But if you look at what they should have had at the end of that year, had they been healthy, that is about as incredible of a roster as you get. It just, unfortunately, the special teams suffered mightily. And again, it doesn't look like an all-in because they didn't, go out and get Matthew Stafford and Jalen Ramsey, but they really did do it ahead of time. And then they really did everything they could to keep that team together. Jason, I get not wanting to take away reps from the younger guys, but doesn't signing some veterans help them learn faster, particularly on offense? I don't know. Like if you have like the perfect veteran, and that's why like the one I would have considered at like tight end was like Mercedes Lewis, because I think he would have been a great blocking tight end. And in the meantime, an awesome mentor for those guys. And I think that could have helped things, but I don't need another Sammy Watkins picked up and just sniping snaps away from the younger guys. I think there's some situations and scenarios where veterans can help and help some of the younger guys develop. But I think more often than not, you want those younger guys to play. And it's up to the coaches to hold those guys accountable and make sure that they're playing at the highest of levels and making sure that they are continuing to develop at the rate that they need to. I know people want to go out and get a wide receiver. I don't really want to see any of Romeo Doubs, Christian Watson, Dontavian Wicks, or Jaden Reed get any fewer snaps at the moment. I want to see all those guys out on the field. I really like all four of those wide receivers. I think all four are going to continue to get better. I kind of want to see Luke Musgrave and Tucker Kraft out on the field. I want to see those guys play. I want to see them get better. So do I think they maybe could have added a veteran here or there, like a Mercedes Lewis, maybe another veteran offensive lineman? Sure. I think that could have maybe done some good and maybe helped a little bit, but I really would have been careful of trying to take away too many snaps from this young, talented roster that needs reps, needs experience. And what you're hoping is that they're going to be their own veterans by 2024, 2025, when that next window hopefully opens. I don't see Watson as the next Adams, Jordy, or Jennings. More Deshaun Jackson, explosive player who gets hurt and doesn't have the hands or route tree. I think it's too early to say, Rob. I think we forget how explosive that second half of last season was. I also think if you tell me that Christian Watson is going to be prime Deshaun Jackson, I'm not necessarily going to say no to that either. Prime Deshaun Jackson was a hell of a playmaker and had a really long career in the NFL. If that's what it is, I don't think you're too upset by spending, the second, or I guess 2 second-round picks technically up to go get him. He's a really talented player. I think he's going to continue to get better. I think we saw that in the second half of last year of just what he's capable of. I think he was just kind of coming back from injury and working his way back in the last couple of games that he played. And I think you're going to see even a better brand of Christian Watson moving forward. All right. What else we got? Anyone else? What do we have? I saw one earlier. Here's this one, I think. Drafting Jordan Love, a third-string running back, in A.J. Dillon and Josiah DeGuara in a single draft was not going all in. Bucks picked Winfield and Wirfs and won by 5. Yes, there is going to be an argument that we can make for a very long time that Green Bay tried to have their cake and eat it too. And what I mean by that is trying to go and win a Super Bowl with Aaron Rodgers while also starting to prepare for the future. And drafting Jordan Love as a replacement long-term for Aaron Rodgers, drafting A.J. Dillon as what they were hoping was going to be a replacement, maybe long-term for Aaron Jones, and then just probably an H-back fullback in round 3. We can even just avoid that one. But taking those first 2 picks, you can make an argument that, again, they were trying to have their cake and eat it too. I think with the Rodgers situation, you have to remember in 2019 when they won 13 games, Aaron did not play great that season. He was good, but he wasn't great. And the couple of years before then, when in the last couple of years of the McCarthy era, he was really bad. That's aggressive. He wasn't good enough. And that's why McCarthy was gone. And that's why they brought Matt LaFleur in. Certainly wasn't bad. I want to retract that from everyone's memory. He certainly was not bad, but he was not anywhere near MVP caliber Aaron Rodgers. And you had a 2019 that was okay, but not great. And you could understand where they were starting to think of this might just do it for this guy. Like he just might be kind of okay to good moving forward and not really see great again. And you draft Jordan, he gets that chip on his shoulder again, and he goes out and has back-to-back MVP seasons, and things change. But you didn't know that at the time. And it's a really tough thing. I do agree ultimately that it probably wasn't the right thing to do. The article I wrote the day after they drafted Jordan Love for Packer Report, it's still out there somewhere, was that there was almost no good window for that to work out. It was almost impossible. And to be fair, they almost maybe pulled it off. Like if they win the Super Bowl in 2020 or 2021, like if they win it in 2021, and I know they didn't even get past the divisional round, but that was a stacked roster. If they win it in 2021 and Rodgers just goes off into the sunset after winning the Super Bowl in 2021 and Jordan Love takes over, and if he was ready to go, that's probably about the only scenario where it works. But the biggest thing is that every day that Jordan Love was on the roster when Aaron Rodgers was, it was not helping Aaron Rodgers' window. They could have used that pick on somebody that could have helped Aaron Rodgers in the 2020, 2021 seasons. And maybe that pick that they used could have got the 2020 team over the hump against the Buccaneers. Maybe it could have helped them in 2021 against the 49ers, where Jordan Love did not. You could also make the argument of, would Aaron have ever really got back to that MVP level if he didn't have the slight of the team drafting a first-round quarterback? There's all different scenarios and wormhole and multiverses that we could go in with this, and it's just really tough to tell. But yes, it did feel like, and then on the flip side, as I mentioned in that article right after too, every day that Aaron is on the team, when Jordan's on the team, it doesn't help Jordan Love's window either, because the best way we know that the cheat code to building a really good team right now is if you have a really young quarterback playing on a really cheap contract, but you were going to always have a scenario where even when Jordan Love was cheap, even if he was ready, you were still going to be paying Aaron a huge contract in some capacity. So there was maybe a sliver of a window to sneak something through where you get a Super Bowl with Aaron, you make the transition to Jordan takes over and goes on and has an awesome career. But the window was so freaking small that it was really tough to kind of pull that off. And so far, they haven't pulled that off, at least to a great degree. All right. Chris, is this the same Chris Duckett I played basketball with at St. Philip's? And, probably way too long ago now? Going back to the incomplete grades, isn't that something of an indictment of Goody's top 100 picks? Those guys should come in and contribute sooner rather than later. Stokes, Savage, regress even. That last part is the bigger thing that I have an overall concern with this team. Josh Myers not only has not gotten better from his rookie season, he has gotten worse. Eric Stokes, before he got injured, let's just say before he got injured, not only did not get better from his rookie season into his second year, he got worse. There are very, very few players on this roster who have taken any sort of significant step and played better in the time where they've been in Green Bay. And I did a huge episode last year, probably around this time, where I said, I think it's time for draft and develop to be dead. I don't think there is the time anymore in the modern NFL to spend the right amount of time developing players the way that you would ideally like it to be. And what ends up happening is you either have really good players when you draft them or you do not. Rashawn Gary is probably the only real example of a player that was a ball of clay when he came in, and now he is a force to be reckoned with. And he was a top 12 pick, and you could have just taken Brian Burns, who was ready from day one, and probably get better results overall through the course of the pick than what you have with Gary, even though I think Gary's the better player right now. So those are real conversations that I think need to be had. I think you look at the teams that are having success, it's guys that are drafting players who can come in and contribute right away and are ready to play right away. Green Bay has always taken this draft and develop long-term approach. And I don't know. I think they need to really reevaluate if that's the best direction for this team moving forward. I could understand it like this past season when they are clearly rebuilding and you can take a little bit more time to develop some of these guys. But man, I really think you need to look at it and say, is it time to just grab the guys that are really good at football from the time that you draft them, rather than trying to take a guy that could be better down the road, but might just never develop? And that's something that I think is a real philosophical question for this team moving forward. Yeah, Mike Smith, not here anymore. And he did have a huge hand in Rashawn Gary's improvement. Agreed. Oh, Darren, if Green Bay finishes last, does Goody take Williams from USC or does he trade that pick? I think in that crazy hypothetical, if they were to finish last, which I don't think is going to happen at all, but in that crazy hypothetical, if they finish last, it's probably because, like, if Jordan plays well, they don't finish last. The only way that they finish last is if either Jordan got hurt or he just he plays really, really bad football. And if that's the case, you take Jordan, you take Caleb Williams, and you don't even really think about it, to be honest. Agreed. You take Williams. Stokes' second year before injury, though, nobody liked Barry's defense, and most players on D were bad. Even Clark stunk. Yeah, but that's not an excuse. Like, even if you even if you are, let's say you are a really good first round pick in the NFL, and you don't like Joe Barry's defense, you still need to work for yourself. If nothing, go into business. If nothing else, go into business for yourself and know that, like, your long-term success in the league is indicative of you having to play good football. And if you put bad tape on film, like, it's going to get recognized by teams throughout the league. So yeah, I don't even care. Like, we can argue Joe Barry's defense and like the differences with Jerry Gray and those sort of things. Like, you, as an individual, you still have to hold yourself to a certain standard and go play a certain standard of football, period. End of story. All right. A couple more questions, guys, and I'm going to get out of here. All right. Good question, Paul. How was it different taking Rodgers when Favre was the guy? Your draft for the long-term and short-term. Teams have to do both. Time will tell, but I think it was the right move for A-Rod and Love. The difference in that scenario was twofold. A, Favre was threatening retirement every year for like 3 years at that point, 3 or 4 years at that point before they took Aaron. That's difference number one. Difference number two is there were legitimate signs of real like not only player progression, but team progression at that point with Favre too, where they were coming off some pretty bad years. Green Bay was as well in the McCarthy era, so I get that. But Green Bay had just come off a 13-3 season the year prior with Matt LaFleur in his first year as head coach. So that was not apples to apples either. The other thing is Green Bay did not, and it wasn't much of a trade up. And I'll always argue that if you're not willing to trade up what basically amounted to a 5th round pick, as was a late 4th, if you're not willing to do that, you shouldn't even be interested in the player anyway. But, you know, they didn't trade up for Rodgers. Rodgers fell into their lap. Green Bay traded up for Jordan Love. So I think there's 3 very key differences there, in that Favre was threatening retirement multiple times. They were playing bad football, and they let Aaron fall to them rather than finishing 13-3 the year before. Aaron came off a pretty good season, was not threatening retirement in any capacity, and they moved up to get Jordan Love. So I think those are the big differences there. Yeah. Also, Aaron was potential number 1 overall pick. Agreed. That's an interesting conversation. I think sell how good of a prospect that Jordan Love was as well. It wasn't probably the prospect that Aaron was. I will say, if you watch both Aaron and Jordan's tape from college, you can at least make an argument that the best of Jordan's tape was better than the best of Aaron's tape. But I don't think Jordan gets quite the credit he deserves for the prospect he was coming out of college. There were some signs that he might not, like the accuracy, the decision making. There were some of those things that were signs of, like, hey, it might not work out. But Jordan was a pretty high-end prospect too. I do think Aaron was probably the better prospect, but I think it's closer than maybe some people think. All right, one more question, then we're going to get out of here. All right, this is a good one to end on. Knowing what Devante knows now, do you think he regrets his decision even a little? I would think that he has to be frustrated with the decision in some capacity, because he went to play with his best friend, and his best friend is now in New Orleans. Like, it didn't even last a year. It was a tumultuous year. I think he put a lot of eggs in Derek Carr and Josh McDaniels' basket, and that's probably never a place where you want to put a ton of trust into, if we're being real. Now, I don't know that things are that much better in Green Bay. And to be fair, Devante and the Raiders just beat Green Bay. So I'm sure he's maybe second guessing the decision of forcing his way to the Raiders when there were probably other teams that were, competing that maybe would have wanted his services. Like he could have maybe been in Miami instead of Tyreek Hill. Maybe Miami would have been interested in acquiring him. There's probably some other places where he could have just like been better in, but I'm sure he's very happy to be close to his family still. But I'm sure there is some level of regret with where things are at right now with the Raiders. Yeah, that's probably true too. If Love was as good in his junior year as a sophomore year, he does go way earlier. All right, friends, I'm losing my voice. I got to get out of here. I'm going to enjoy the rest of my night. I hope you guys do the same. Cheers to all of you. Thanks so much for making this happy hour really fun every single Friday. We'll be back here next Friday. We've got Pack-A-Day Live next Wednesday, members only Q&A on Thursday, happy hour next Friday, all new episodes 365 days a year. Pack-A-Day Podcast memberships available for you guys. Pack-A-Day Podcast swag at packadaypodcast.com. I think that's all the fun stuff that I get to plug. Until then, cheers. I'll see you guys soon. But until next time, and as always, go Pack-O.